everywhere you go, you're going to take your thoughts, your feelings, your beliefs, your associations, your past, your memories, your identification with form, your identification as this body. You're going to take your slavery and try to find freedom.
It's closed, right?
It's closed. It's like set. It's like limited. It's like only what you know.
Been in a book somewhere, right?
That's exactly right. Somebody would have told me.
Just the idea that, hey, you can do that for yourself, and it's not going to interfere with your job or your wife or your family.
Hello, my name is Richard Miller, and welcome to Never Not Here. You hear me say many times, this show is our way to take a fresh new look at the world. And somehow we're, I don't know if we want to figure out life, but we want to know life. We want to feel life. I guess we're scared we're missing life. I don't know. One thing is we all agree that there's only now. And I've never been in the future. I don't know about you guys. Or I've never really been in the past. I remember the past and I can dream about the future. And I know that life is now, and I know that my breath is now, and I know that my heart beats now. And something must be really important about now because that's it. People say that's all we got is now. And yet, somehow, I'm really content with just letting my attention rove all around, my attention doesn't really stay with the now. And so here I am doing this show and saying this show is our way to take a fresh new look at the world, and I'm still taking a fresh new look. And to help us today, we have a guest that from England, not from London, from Brighton. And help me welcome Jeff Foster.
Thank you.
And you've graced us with so many beautiful meetings this last 3 or 4 days. And you're so clear, to me, about this is it. Now is life. And it's like a breakthrough, but we all know it, but still it's a breakthrough.
It's a constant breakthrough. Yeah, it's... even the concept now, it's really just another concept, really. This nowness, this aliveness, this thisness, it can't really be spoken of. It's too alive. So even to call it now is to already kill it, And as you said, we all, on some level, know that there's just now, there's just this, but somehow the knowledge of it, the knowing of it, the understanding of it isn't it. Because it can't be contained by any understanding. It can't be captured by any belief or concept it's too fresh, it's too alive, it's too present to be known. So I always talk about this as a plunge into the unknown, which is where we always are, the unknown.
That's where we always are. This nowness is always is the unknown. And then our apparatus for understanding or for conceptualizing just is not, it can never stretch itself that much. I mean, it's just got to disappear. There's no room for it.
Nothing has to disappear now. It's this thing that we call mind. Well, of course, there isn't a mind. There's nothing solid there called a mind. There's just presently arising thought. And those thoughts can apparently be about the past and the future, about looking back or looking forward. But of course, it's always happening now. So actually, you're never not here. Even thought, it's always here. It's always now. It may be a thought about the future, but really the future always happens now, and the past always happens now. A memory of the past isn't actually a memory of the past. It's a presently arising thought with a little label on it that says past. But actually, it's a present thought. Everything is a present appearance. So really this thing that we call the mind really can't get in the way. It's not a block. It's not a block. It doesn't need to be rejected. You know, it's not the enemy. I think a lot of spiritual teachings, although they're very well-meaning, they have the effect of making thought into the enemy. Because a lot of these teachings, it's like what you've just said, they say everything's here and now, and the mind is always looking into the past and future, and so the mind is somehow a block to this. So if we got rid of the mind, if we somehow anesthetized, is that the right word? Anesthetized,
I'm not so sure
whatever.
myself.
If we somehow got rid of that movement, then we'd just be able to be here now. But of course, it's always here now. And even that, what we call anticipation, is just a thought arising now, arising in this presence, in this aliveness. So really, there's no problem.
Well, we know we're always now. We know our thoughts are always now. We know our quote-unquote mind is always now. But somehow, wouldn't there be a beauty if our attention was... Our attention is always now, of course, but I mean, somehow it's not focused on now.
It can't be.
Focused on a story of now.
It can't be. If you and now cannot coexist. You could never be here now. If you were really here now,
wow.
there would be no you.
Wow, that is really precise, you know, because like there's no room in the now for an extra baggage, right? It's like...
So you trying to be here now gives you a future. There's always a future in which you will be here now. So you're fueling this mechanism that you're seeking to...
Oh, if I'm trying to be here now.
Yeah. Which is all we can do, really.
No, but just by my being here, but my putting my attention on Richard Miller, that's like, I'm gone. I'm a goner already, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no room for it.
There's no room. You is really the past and the future. Your life story. You and your life story. So when we talk about being here now, like who is going to be here now? If you were going to be here now, who would be here now? That's the question. What would be here now is a load of junk. The past and future. If you could be here now, it would be the past and future that would be here now.
Which can't happen.
which is always happening.
Which is, yeah.
Yeah.
As a dead story, because there's no life in the past, no life in the future, and no way to live in it or manipulate it or act in it or
really
get an ounce of breath out of it. Or
if you were fully here now, you wouldn't be here at all.
That's what the meaning is. It's like
and you wouldn't even know it. There wouldn't be a you.
Dissolution.
There wouldn't be a you to be here now.
So
you don't really want to be here now.
Right. No, it doesn't sound all that fun, you know.
Yeah, no one would want to be here now. So that's why we latch onto the idea of being here now and turn that into a process, a goal, and keep ourselves going. Strengthen ourselves, actually.
Uh-huh.
We strengthen the person who's going to be here now.
So, like, basically we're strengthening the future.
Yeah, we give ourselves a future.
Because then it's going to be rosy, just like all our futures when we make enough money, when we get the right cars, when we be here now. I mean, when our kids graduate from school, everything is projected somewhere, you know, to later.
So being here now just becomes the new religion. It becomes the new goal. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, there's nothing wrong with any of these practices or, you know, the attempts to reach goals. But all there is this here-ness, this aliveness, this unnameable isness. I mean, it can't really be spoken of. Really, the now can't really be spoken of. The moment we even call it the now, we're back into the story. Now versus then. We're in the dream of duality, you know. Me versus you, this versus that, black, white, up, down. Now versus then. So we think of now as a little unit of time somehow squeezed between the past and the future. So it's still a thing, separate from everything else. Really, what the word now points to is this vastness, this openness, this aliveness in which everything arises, including the idea of now and then. So really now is just an idea arising in this unnameable thisness, the openness, the oneness. I mean, it's been given a billion different names, and of course it's none of those things.
None of them work. Huh?
None of them work. Yeah.
So they're just abstractions like everything else. It's
Yeah.
just an abstraction from a nameless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really that's the miracle, really, that whatever's happening, it's always arising out of the unnameable, the unknowable isness, the source. And everything is arising out of that and falling back into that, and everything is a manifestation of that. Which all sounds very very nice.
Somehow I try to make it important, you know.
Yeah.
I tell myself,
Well,
well, that's the only place where energy is. That's the only place where
Yeah.
sustenance is. That's the only place where growth is, or
Yeah.
where my body is growing. Where my
What all that points to is this, you know, sitting
Yeah.
on this sofa with a microphone and air and breathing and sounds and walls and flowers, and it's in the ordinary. It's in the ordinariness of this. And it's like, where else would oneness be? Where else would the source be? But here. And out of this arises the idea that I'm a separate person. Out of the source arises the idea of me. And once you have that, you have a whole world, and you have.
It just arises, you mean, not by any logic or by not
emerges.
by force, but it is by force in a way, because it's always happens, right? So it is somehow a given that
This is happening.
yeah.
Yeah. Beyond all words or concepts, ideologies, religions, beliefs, this is happening. That's the miracle right there. That's the miracle, that anything is happening at all. I always say this could have been a blank nothingness. And yet there's colours and sounds and sights and smells and bodies and thoughts happening and conversations. There's nothing.
So much intricacy, actually. There's so much, wildlife and all that, but just every molecule and in the movements of cells and the movements of life and taking in and giving out, you know, like what we call as sustenance and what we call as waste. And
it's astonishing.
So astonishing.
Yeah.
It's just quite unbelievable.
Yeah, and yet we spend our lives wanting so much more. You know, that's where it all begins. That's what I usually say is this. It's where it all begins. This isn't enough. That's where all the seeking of a lifetime begins. This isn't enough. What's been given, isn't enough. I want more. And the whole search of a lifetime, this incessant search for something more that we humans seem to be so good at. It's the whole thing rests on the assumption that there's a separate me, separate from life. You know, we talk about me and my life. As if we were somehow separate from this, which is life happening. We talk about me and my life as if I possess this little piece of life that I call my own. And then, of course, once you have a bit of life, you're terrified of losing it, and we call that death. So the moment you have an individual, you have separation. And the moment you have separation, you have a longing for the separation to end. A longing to return home. So really, the whole search of a lifetime, the whole search for something more money, more friends, more presence, more awareness, more nowness. It's always a movement into the future, and the whole thing is fueled by a sense of lack.
It's just some like primordial anxiety or this separation, like somehow it springs out of a knowing of unity, I guess. Because if you never know unity, what would separation mean? Nothing.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So that's why...
the original pain or something like that, you know? I don't know what drives us.
Yeah, and that's... And out of that separation, in a million different ways, we seek to end the separation. But what we're doing, we're using separation to try and end separation. We're using duality. to try and end duality. And it will never work.
So that's why non-duality is so careful about not creating another thing to do or another thing that's going to happen in the future. And
Yeah, I like to say that it's not about a doing, it's about a seeing. And of course, the moment you say that, it's turned into another doing. The moment you say anything, actually, it can be turned into a goal and into a doing. So the moment I say seeing, people ask, well, who sees? Who's going to do this seeing? I'm going to have to do this seeing. So really, when using language, we're kind of doomed from the very beginning when we're talking about non-duality, because the words operate in the world of duality. So we're trying to use duality to get beyond duality. And then we have this idea of non-duality that's somehow separate from duality. It's somehow out there beyond the duality. And of course, even the word non-duality is a completely dualistic concept. It's like non-duality versus everything that isn't non-duality. So really, what I usually say is we should really shut up about this and we shouldn't talk about it ever again. So that's the end of the interview then.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, I just go along like I don't hear those things, But anyhow, seeing is somehow wedded to attention, right? I mean, because when your attention falls on something, you can see it. Oftentimes, I don't know, unless somehow it's really clouded in what you think about it already, has a veil of knowing that goes around it, then your attention is somehow slanted toward what you think you know. But here's what I want to ask, really. Attention seems like focused on a small spot. This is a puzzle. Because attention doesn't go everywhere. Maybe we don't have the capacity to have a pan attention that's everywhere at the same time. So attention seems like that's a doing again. Move your attention, or attention just moves, and then somehow attention is wedded to seeing, because you see when a fresh attention falls on maybe a behavior or something. You see an anger in a new light, and you think, oh my God, that just doesn't do anything for anybody. And you just see it,
Yeah, I like to talk about newborn babies, because you watch any newborn baby, or any animal actually. I used to watch my cat quite a lot, and her attention was just drawn. It was so spontaneous that she would sit in our backyard, in our garden, and it was like, it was so natural. It wasn't an attention that she was doing. She wasn't moving her attention. It was being moved by what was happening, because she wasn't separate from what was happening. As human beings, we've shut ourselves off so much from literally from what's happening, from this. And then having shut ourselves off, having created this little me separate from this, and having spent our lives defending this me, feeling that we're somehow in control of that, we then even think that we have control over our attention. And then a lot of these spiritual practices are about controlling your attention or your intention, and it just, in a way, it's so unnatural.
Sometimes it seems like you could do it, because if I say pay attention to your right foot, and then you can just kind of, oh yeah, my toe itches.
Yeah, left to its own devices, this attention will go wherever it needs to. These eyes will, the eyes, left to their own devices, the eyes will look at whatever.
Well, often it's tied to your senses, right? Because if you hear noise, there's a fly or something, you say, oh, where's that? Or, there's a flash of light, or,
But really what we mean by attention is knowledge. Knowledge. We can only experience what we know. We experience what we know.
You said that this weekend, and it really blew me away, because I think you said that no experience is new. Mm-hmm. It blew me away. I thought, well, what am I doing here? I thought I was getting a new experience.
Yeah, experience is knowledge. We have to tell ourselves what we're experiencing in order to know what we're experiencing. Without the knowledge,
to describe it, right?
Yeah, we know what we're experiencing. We have to tell ourselves what we're experiencing.
Somehow, but when we're just okay with just an infant, though, doesn't have a vast bank of experiences, and they can't really tell themselves. Someone else tells them, I guess.
Yeah, and that's where the person begins to be rebuilt. That's how we build up a person, knowledge. And then we have a relationship with our own experience. It's like the experience. An experience is the experiencer, is the me. In order to have an experience, there has to be an experiencer who knows that experience, who experiences that experience.
So the experiencer is just a mass of conditioning, which is like knowledge, quote unquote knowledge,
experience.
Because it's
the experiencer projects their knowledge and creates an experience. So it's like with this this microphone.
Right.
In order to experience it as a microphone, I have to know it's a microphone. There has to be the knowledge there that it's a microphone. Otherwise, you have no way of knowing what you're experiencing. And you're meeting it for the first time.
Right. But when you meet something for the first time, you still see it. I guess you see the boundaries that our eyes and ears see, because we see in a certain series of wavelengths and so on. We see a certain colors of light.
Yeah. And of course, knowledge is very useful. It's very useful to be able to call that a chair, for example. But what happens in humans is that once we know it, we kind of don't see it anymore.
It's never fresh again.
It's never fresh. Once we've experienced it, it's kind of stored. It's stored there, and we've seen the chair. We've experienced chairs before, so chairs aren't interesting anymore. So we want something higher than chairs because we've experienced chairs. We've experienced all this stuff in this world. So that's where the spiritual search begins, the search for the extraordinary, because we've made this so ordinary. We've experienced this. We've already experienced sitting on a sofa.
It's in the basket, right? It's in the basket.
It's done.
We're done. We're done with that.
We're done with that.
We can do it again, but it's never going to be fresh.
Yeah. So it's like we've already experienced sitting on a sofa. We've already experienced talking into a microphone before.
Sometimes I like to say that because before when we mentioned, or you mentioned it, and we were both saying how marvelous it is. There's so much variation and so much intricacy, and the whole universe is now, and everything's happening. And then we say sometimes we ignore that, and I want to say, well, it's not out of being ungrateful, or it's not out of being a mean-spirited person, but it's more like we're just using a mechanism that collects those things and puts them into storage, and the mechanism does all those things. It ignores what's known and looks for what's moving, because maybe it's. One time I thought it's just a mechanism that tries to save our life. So it looks what's shaking in the bushes is interesting, but what's just peaceful and like who I am is not really a risk, and so.
Yeah, but what happens? We become so dulled to the world. We become so dulled to a chair, and actually, it's not really a chair at all. Everything is alive. It's all alive. It's aliveness. It's life happening, and there's nothing static. There's nothing stagnant. It appears to be solid. Everything appears to be solid, and that's the it's astonishing really how solid and real it appears. But actually, even a simple chair, even the word chair, the knowledge chair, which goes along with the experience of chair, kills it. The word chair is a dead thing. It's memory. It's a second-hand word that you've picked up. So really, what that is, what that thing over there is, really we have no way of knowing. I mean, we've all had this experience. when you first really fall in love, or you're listening to your favorite piece of music, or you're out walking in nature, or you're playing with very young children. It's like you're just drawn into the mystery, and there's no words for it. And all past and future fall away. Really, the you, the me, the separate solid self falls away. And really, you have no way of knowing what you're experiencing. It's too alive. You don't stop for a moment and tell yourself what you're experiencing because you're too busy experiencing it. So really, it has no name. It's not an experience. When you fall away, when the past and future falls away, you have no way of knowing what you're experiencing. And then the mind may come back in later and say, oh, I experienced X, Y, and Z. And it's always a story told in hindsight. Really, at the heart of every experience, there is no one there who is experiencing. Really, there is no experience. There's just what's happening. There's just the miracle of what's happening. So experience is knowledge.
Isn't it funny that It must be that it's just too much, because there is a tendency to just jump out of the experience and store it, describe it to yourself and say, oh, I just did this, and put it in words, and which actually separates yourself from that experience.
Yeah.
And is it just too vibrant? And, like that, my heart just starts pounding out of my chest and I'm going to say I'm going to explode.
Yeah, in a sense, there's the fear of kind of being torn apart, which is true. We are being torn apart, but there's nothing to fear. At the heart of that, there's nothing to fear. It's really strange, really. What we fear most is liberation.
So that means liberation from ourselves and our story, right?
Exactly.
Because where else is the bondage?
Yeah. So that's why we can only, we go bungee jumping or we immerse ourselves in movies, but not for too long. We can't take too much of it. We quickly have to go back into our story, and it's really out of fear of being nothing. That's really at the root of this whole thing. It's fear of being nothing, which is death, which is what we call death. And of course, death is liberation, and really that death is always happening because the past is always falling away. The person, the separate me, is always falling away.
You mean every second, or what do you mean? Or do you mean like in sleep, or what do you mean?
All the time.
All the time, every second, every moment.
Yeah, it's always
falling
a falling.
Away, huh?
Life isn't a thing; it's a falling. It's a falling, and really every night, in deep dreamless sleep, you aren't there. The separate self is not there. You're dead. Every night in deep dreamless sleep, you are dead.
And it's a relief, right?
And it's a relief.
And
we love our sleep.
I love it.
We love we love it. We love it.
Right.
And yet somehow we wake up in the morning and it's like, we've all had this experience. Maybe for a few moments in the morning, you have no idea who you are or where you are. And then suddenly it's, oh, that's who I am. Oh, that's what I've got to do today. So it's like every morning the self, it reincarnates. That's the reincarnation. If there's any reincarnation, that's the reincarnation every morning. Every night we die, every morning we reincarnate.
So we've all got so many people. I mean, I think I can say we all, but we all are just trying to find freedom and liberation.
Yeah.
With all our ideas, and with all our identities, and with all our relationships, and and drag all that stuff with. Yeah. And so then we're just really doing a crazy thing.
And yet what we really long for is the end of all of that. It's a plunge into the unknown, into the nothingness that we are. And in that nothingness, it's not an empty, dead, black nothingness. It's a fullness. The emptiness is a fullness. That it's like in the place where you once thought a separate person lived. When you really look, there's just an absence. There's nothing there. But that absence is what is allowing this whole world to play itself out. It's an absence that is a perfect presence. It's the perfect presence of everything. And it can't be understood. That's what I always say. It can't be understood. The mind could only ever see paradox there. How can an absence be a perfect presence? How can nothing be something? There's no way that the individual could ever understand this. And even if they could.
Well, what is the nothing? The nothing is just our story is nothing. Our story, but whatever is real is a presence.
Even nothing and something, even those are just more absence and presence. Really, where after a lifetime of seeking and suffering and trying to understand where are you left? You're left here. You're left sitting on a sofa talking into a microphone or whatever you're doing.
We're just left where we've always been.
We're left where that's the cosmic joke of the whole thing. It's the cosmic joke.
Right. A lot of us, and I don't know, we are different ages here and so on, and in our audience, but a lot of there's a lot what they call New Age. And I think it started decades ago, but a lot of it had to do with focusing your thoughts and prosperity and health, but basically under all those thought structures is the fact that somehow the universe is benevolent, or the universe takes care of you, or somehow But still, there's this, and that's stuck, like in me too, because like I think, okay, now we're talking about this nothing, we're talking about jettisoning all that's extraneous, which is me. But somehow I think, okay, well, it's going to be all right when I get there, right? I mean, there's some benevolence or something, life works, and I don't know. That's kind of a ground belief. I'm just kind of noticing that I'm still hoping for the best in heaven, or wherever that place is where there's nothing. But
yeah, it's like every night in deep dreamless sleep, you're not there, and yet, the heart beats and breathing happens, and blood rushes through the body, and it restores itself, and somehow, in the absence of you, in the absence of your seeking and your suffering and your goals and your hopes and your dreams, somehow that's the healing. And actually the word healing is related to the word wholeness. Healing is wholeness. Somehow in the absence of this separate self, that's the healing, that's the benevolence. And it's that which is breathing now, and that's that which is beating the heart and seeing and hearing and thoughts arising, and it's taking care of itself. It's always taking care of itself. It's like the separate individual who feels separate from life and who is seeking and seeking and seeking could never see this. They're too busy trying to get somewhere. They're too busy trying to escape what is. Really the whole thing is an attempt to escape.
So in other
happening.
words, this escaping is kind of like a non-healing or an illness.
In a sense,
can you say that?
In a sense, and so the end of the seeking is the healing, and then this just takes care of itself. And when it gets hurt, it tries to heal itself, and when it can't heal itself anymore, it dies. There's a perfect balance to it all. There's an intelligence to this that we'll never hope to understand. There's an intelligence happening here that is totally beyond any concept, beyond the mind. We'll never understand it. And the beauty of it is we don't need to. We don't need to.
I was thinking that healing wasn't a complete word, and you just said it, because you said when the body can't, or not the body, but just when existence can't heal itself anymore, it dies.
Which is the healing, which is the ultimate healing.
Which is ultimate healing. Oh, that's an ultimate healing. Because I was thinking that healing means like I don't die. Well, I mean, you get well, But
death is the ultimate healing, because it's the end of me and my problems. It's the end of separation. It's the end of seeking. It's the end of the separate individual. It's the ultimate healing. And yet we fear it. It's very strange. We've got it completely back to front, really.
Right. And in such great masses, too, because, just talking about when we were talking earlier about now and future and stuff like that, how much of the world is operating only in thought? And, they're just, their actions spring out of decisions which arise in thought, by calculating future projections and past patterns. We look for a pattern, basically, in what we, the mystery. Okay, let me go this one. A real mystery is that the content of now is always shifting. It's always evolving and flowering and opening. And so then that's kind of like a real mystery. And then, okay, our natural reaction is to say, well, is there a pattern to it? Maybe we can. And I guess because we want to.
Well, the search for a pattern is to. This is just a spontaneous play, and it's the linking up that is the identity. It's the pattern that is the identity. That's where we get our identity from linking up.
Linking events.
Linking events.
In a way, yeah, I guess, would you call them events? But they're always in the present. They're the content of the present, and they're always shifting. And so then, let's call those events. And
so say a thought arises today that apparently arose yesterday. And we link those up and
say, oh gosh, that's similar.
They're similar. And there's the me. That's where the me is born. This is just a spontaneous play out of nothing, out of nowhere. there's nothing solid about it. There's nothing really that links to anything else. So this is what this starts to do. It starts to link up, and in that it starts to build the identity.
Build solidity.
Build solidity where there is none.
Yeah.
Where there is none. There's just this openness. Life doesn't know solidity.
So we're building this tapestry of these patterns that are events that we believe we've experienced.
Yeah.
And somehow that we build a whole world out of that.
Mm-hmm. That's where it begins.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
What a grand employment.
So really, we're just newborn babies. We're just seeing this for the first time. That's all we are. And we just got a little lost in this linking game, in this seeking game, and the trying to be someone game. We think it's very important to be someone in the world, very important to make our mark, to make our lives work, to perfect ourselves, to improve ourselves, and yet behind all of that, death is always there, lingering, and it's quietly whispering, it's not yours. It could be taken away from you any moment. So that's always the fear that people have behind all their success and their building, their attempt to build an identity. Behind that is fear.
So the only way we can mount this great structure is by ignoring death.
Yeah.
Once we just cut out death and say, okay, put that on the other side there, and we won't look at that for a while, and then we don't have that feedback and we start building these castles in the sand of ideas and of concepts and of patterns, basically. Mm-hmm. And somehow science makes them do things, and you can even sell it. So then we think it must be real because people are paying money for it, right? We can go to the moon and we can have a computer and a TV and a mix master.
I mean, it's astonishing, really. This game that oneness plays, the game of diversity. It's oneness. It's unity appearing in diversity and as diversity. So, sometimes I say that this separation thing, this duality thing, this identity thing, it's the suffering thing. It's the price we pay for getting this world, for having a whole world. It's the price we pay, but there's no mistakes. In the seeing that there's no one here, you lose the world.
But you're still in it.
Apparently so.
How is that?
Apparently so.
How is that? How does that feel? I mean, in a way you've seen, in a very deep way. Deep is a nasty word too, because it means it's going somewhere. But I mean, you've seen, and apparently there's no world, but yet you're in it and you're living it and you're paying your mortgage and all those things, which are
that's the mystery.
Fun.
That's the mystery. That's the mystery that it's like the mind says. The mind thinks it's doing everything. Thinks it's in control of this. So it projects that, in the absence of the mind, in the absence of me, nothing will get done. Life will somehow cease. It will cease to function. And the astonishing thing is that somehow in the absence of you, life lives itself in its fullness. But I don't understand it.
Yeah. Maybe it's because the miracle is joyous, and somehow life lives much more smooth. Maybe joy is the oil of life, and just oils it up and moves real smooth. And
because it's seen that this is all there is. That what's happening now is all there is. Really, we could say that this is always our last moment. We're never guaranteed anything more than this. Never. And it's really arrogance in a way to think that we're going to have a future, that we can somehow deserve it. We just don't know. But this is happening. So that's why this is so precious. That's the seeing how precious this is and how fragile this is, and how fleeting this is. So perhaps that's the joy in it. It's release from a future. Because the future makes it heavy. When the future goes, it's the lightness being, is the lightness of what's happening.
In the way, a future is just a little tiny belief, because what just crossed my mind is, okay, let's say I got a month vacation. My boss loves me, and he just gave me a month vacation, and I'm not working for 4 weeks, and I might be on top of the world, I just might think, oh, my God. And then, it might have happened that instead of a vacation, he said, you're laid off, and I'm not working for 4 weeks. Or maybe even after the vacation or in the middle of it, they said, oh, gosh, we just failed, this company just downsized or something. And it changes everything. From a great joy and a great lightness and a great beauty, and then all of a sudden there's a heaviness and a constriction, and like, oh God, I'm not going to make it, and I'm not going to have this income. Just a tiny belief kind of can just change everything.
Yeah, we have so many ideas about how our lives should be, how our lives should go, what life should and shouldn't give us. Somehow in the absence of that, in the absence of knowing what's best for you, there's the sense that whatever's happening is what's best for you. It's very strange. And what you were saying before, it's tiny beliefs are, this whole thing is built on tiny beliefs. And really, the whole history, for example, the whole history of the universe, everything that's ever happened, is a tiny little belief. The history of the universe is a tiny little belief arising here. And when that's not there is no history of the universe.
Let me say this now.
That's cool,
okay.
Isn't it?
I don't know. Yeah, what do you need a universe for? It's just life. But what I wanted to ask, sometimes, and even in, I don't know if I want to say metaphysical or some kind, let's just say meetings where people are asking about life, and then someone might interject an explanation, a scientific explanation, and they'll start talking about quarks or something like that, or quantum physics. And then they'll somehow demonstrate that everything is really one because there's so much space, and then these actual particles and molecules are really, and atoms are so small, and the parts that make up atoms and so on, and that people, somehow your belief will just rest a little bit, and it's just a story. It doesn't mean a thing. It's just like we were saying, the story of the universe is not even there, but somehow then the teaching goes on, or whatever happens, we go into emotions, and we go into who we think we are, or there's certain releases, and somehow just the fact that there was a story, which was an explanation, and somehow semi-believable. People, the know that, hey, what do you mean there's oneness? I know I'm separate from you. I don't feel your leg. That somehow drops away, and think, oh yeah, quantum physics, maybe we are one. Who knows? And that relaxing somehow. I don't say it gets you somewhere, but it seems significant somehow.
Yeah, words are funny things, although it's never about the words. Sometimes some words heard in a certain way can somehow shift something or relax something. It's very strange, really. It's in the hearing, though. It's in the hearing. Sometimes
it's like a belief is extinguished or partially extinguished. Some
but
belief.
Really, it's not about the words, though, because it's a guy who comes to my meetings, and he's been coming for about a year now. And when he first started coming to the meetings, I would be saying the same thing that I am now a year ago. But a year ago, the same words would make him angry, frustrated, confused. And these days, he hears the same words, and there's a relaxation, and there's a recognition of what those words are pointing to, and it's the same words. So it's something to do with, it's the hearing. It's the readiness to hear, which isn't something that you can do. You can't make yourself ready. That always, I find that very mysterious. That at some point, and who knows when, there's a readiness to hear something beyond what you thought you knew, and to relax into something something else,
I can testify to that, because I remember I was real curious about this one teacher, and I kind of wanted to go see him, so I started reading their book, And I read it, the first time I read it, I thought, this is inane, this is nothing, and this is just platitudes. Everybody says this, so, where's the meat, and there's no action here. And I was just rejecting it, and for some reason, and this is kind of the mystery that I read the book again, and actually on the fourth reading, I kind of fell in love with it, and I don't know how that I ever read it 4 times, with so much rejection in the beginning. And then I went and saw the person, and it was kind of like the kickoff of all non-duality for me, where I really started to move into it and accept his teaching.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you said falling in love. It's a falling. That's what I always call it. It's a falling. You can't do that readiness. You can't do falling in love. You can't try to fall in love. And we all know this. Even people who are interested in spirituality, we call it falling in love. It hits you by surprise.
For sure. I mean, I wasn't reading the book 4 times on purpose either, I was just kind of drawn to it and saying, why do people say they like her? I mean, I don't get it.
Yeah, it's a falling. It's a falling. And somehow we all long to fall. And yet, it's often the thing that we fear the most.
Rules, we make rules of life, just watch your hindsight, just watch your backsides or something. Someone's going to come up and stab you or something like that. And then we just follow those rules blindly. And it's so much fun to open up, but then we just think, oh God, the moment we allow a little niche, someone's going to shove their knife in there and we're going to get it.
And until it happens, it hasn't happened. That's what, that's what we're saying. Until our worst fears are really never realized. I mean, how many of your worst fears in your whole life have ever come true? Come on,
Yeah, for me, none.
None.
I mean...
And if they do, you deal with it.
Yeah. I guess one guy pointed a gun at me once, but I mean, I don't know, somehow it didn't seem like a big deal. I can tell a story in a dramatic way, and I just said, put it down, we don't need it. You don't want to do that, and I don't want to either. Mm-hmm. But I mean, basically, like the news is like two things that happen out of 2 million or 200 million, and then we say, oh, that's a possibility. For some reason we latch onto it and say there's risk, let's have a fear about it.
Yep. And we spend so much of our energy trying to protect ourselves from death that we don't really live, and someone who's really living doesn't even think about death. It happens when it happens, it comes when it comes, but it hasn't come yet. That's all you need to know.
As my mother aged, I kind of got it that, we're never ready for death. So that means we're always ready for death. And I don't know if I really am, but I mean, it seems like I'm not so afraid of it as I once was.
My girlfriend, a few months ago, she was lying in bed and she's turned to me, said, "Oh, Jeff, I see it. Death is nothing." It's such a simple thing. Death is so simple. It's nothing. And the rest is fear. The rest is a story. Nothing changes really upon death.
When we say these things, I think, they're probably really obtuse, like it's not something that really goes across the airwaves and say, hey guys, death is nothing. And,
Yeah, this can be
join our club and you'll know it. It's not
very
that, but
challenging to hear. It goes against everything we're ever taught, everything that we know, everything we believe. It's, that's why I don't expect people to hear this, but that, it's like my meetings, I never would make anyone come. It's like there has to be that readiness. I always think there has to be that readiness to hear. And that's usually what brings people to these meetings or to listen to videos like this. There's perhaps that readiness was already happened, or in a way.
I mean, somehow I guess this show is kind of like aiming out to just anyone that turns on the station. And so then I don't know if there's a readiness or not. You can always turn it off. But I mean, like here's what I want to say. Like Amy's your girlfriend said, "Oh, gee, Jeff, I realize death is nothing." So that's a marvelous, marvelous discovery. But it's not a really good teaching.
No.
Because if you were telling her, hey, and I was, you didn't jump in and say, "Hey, I told you that." No, that's just so these things like even oneness or like that the world is an illusion, or I mean, these things are marvelous discoveries,
but not very good teachings. But that's why I don't call myself a teacher.
Uh-huh.
I'm a pretty bad teacher. I always call
What are you? Maybe you're a model.
I don't know what I am.
I
don't know. I just call this a sharing. It's a sharing. It's a sharing. It's a sharing. I always call it a sharing of what's on some level. It's already known. It's like, to put it into kind of ordinary language, I guess. There's a part of us that is okay with whatever happens. Even our own illness and our own death. There's a part of us that calmly and silently and watches.
Somehow that's suppressed, or otherwise there's a great overlay on top of it, you know.
Yeah, there's a part of us, and of course it isn't really a part of us, but it's just a way of putting it into language. There's a part of us that just calmly sits there and watches everything that happens in our lives, and watches the body get old, and watches death happening. And that part
is probably our core, right?
That
is the core.
Yeah.
That's without the unadorned us.
Yeah. Which is similar to saying this body doesn't know death. That's why I say death is nothing. This body itself doesn't distinguish between life and death. Life and death is they're thoughts, they're concepts. Mm-hmm. It's duality, up, down, yin-yang, life, death. So this body doesn't know duality, it just functions.
Yeah, the body doesn't know duality and doesn't know
functions.
Death, you know.
It doesn't know death.
But
it's the most natural thing. Death is the most natural thing to, my cat, when it was time for her to die, there was no fear.
Right.
There was no fear. It was natural. And then she dies and she's buried and the worms eat her and life goes on. Life doesn't cease. Life cannot cease. So that's why I say that death is nothing.
But just matter, like matter. Where does matter come from? It comes out of stardust, right?
Yeah.
So actually we're made of stardust.
Yeah.
And we're not only ancient, we're like primordial. Our material that makes us.
I didn't know you were that old.
Yeah?
Yeah. I thought you were in your 50s
really,
or something.
Really big, really
wow.
old dude.
You look good for your age.
I want to talk, a lot of times teachers do slip into talk about readiness, and especially on this show, like I like to talk, but we really can't say that somebody's ready and not ready.
No, of course
right?
not. The only reason I say
that degenerates a past and a future.
Yeah, of course not. The only reason I say that is because I think most people would run a mile from certainly from what I say in my meetings. They would hear it for 2 minutes and go, this is a load of philosophical crap, and they'd run a mile. But other people
would fly 1,000 miles to see it.
Yeah, and they do. And that's all I mean by readiness. It's not something mystical or spiritual. It's just the fact that people turn up to hear this at all. It just suggests that there's some sort of recognition there. There's some hearing that's happening that perhaps wasn't there before.
I have this crazy idea, with the show too, that, just if the words were a little bit different or something, because some words are turn-offs, and then why use them? If, one thing I think is that a teacher should be talking to who's in front of them, mm-hmm. And not just giving a standard rote. This is my good teaching that I've developed, and maybe it's good for certain people that come steeped in the Eastern tradition, let's say, or something like that, and you can talk about all these words, karma, and I don't know what, we don't need them. But then if a teacher is talking to the people that come to him, and just Joe Blow comes to off the street, or maybe someone asking for $1, and there should be I guess there's a way to say, hey, reality and future.
Yeah.
Unreality, these are important hints or keys. And there's probably, I just have this idea that simplified language is a magnet.
Mm. Yeah, and I know what you're saying, and I do. That's why I don't talk about this really outside of my meetings and interviews like this. If you meet someone on the street, it's like I say, you meet someone on the street, and they're starving, hungry, and they haven't eaten in 2 weeks, and they come up to you and they ask for food. You don't sit there and talk about ultimate reality and the fact that all suffering is an illusion, and that there's no separate self, and what they need is food. They need food, and you feed them. That's it's that's the teaching, really.
Sometimes, sometimes a guy comes up on the street, comes up to me, and he's like the best salesman in the world. He's got this story, and he can weave it, and he can interact with me in any way, and no matter what I say, he's on it this way and that way. Maybe he's reading me poems or just reciting the things that... this guy is the most talented, one of the most talented persons. I don't think he needs food, he needs an idea that maybe going to work is okay.
Yeah.
But some of these guys are really, really bright.
Oh yeah, but
bright stars.
All I mean by that is that you meet people where they are.
Right. That's exactly what I was
saying.
You
feed them what they need. You don't sit back and say, oh, there's no one, there's no suffering, there's no past, there's no future. Right. You meet them with their language,
Right, and maybe it's a hamburger and a couple of bucks, or
exactly, or maybe it's walking away.
A word of encouragement. Maybe it's walking away. Maybe
Yeah.
I'd saying I really respect you. You're really, really a cool guy.
But you certainly don't sit there and talk about ultimate reality and karma and all. No, you know that's very separating. That's why I don't see this as a teaching, because to me a teaching implies something solid, something kind of fixed. This is not a teaching, it's life expressing itself. It's an expression of life. And life doesn't sit back and sit on its throne and kind of and know everything and look down upon the world and pity the poor.
If you were like me, you guys would be okay too.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
Sharing has been really important to me, but not all my life. It just kind of flowered a couple years ago, and out of that came Never Not Here, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to share everywhere. Maybe too much. Maybe I'm out of balance with it, but
that seems to be the nature of this. It seems to delight in sharing. There's something about sharing. It's Jesus said, when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. There's something very precious about meeting other people, even though in a sense there are no people, there are no separate people.
Right.
But to meet
other expressions.
Yeah, other expressions, because it's all an expression, and really no expression is higher or lower than any other. So then life, it's just a question of watching the infinite expressions of this.
Yeah.
And it's a constant delight, and it's who knows how it's going to express itself next.
Tell us a little bit about your books, because you got 2 books, right?
I have 3 books now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The Jeff Foster empire is growing.
We only got a little bit of time left.
Okay. My first book is Life Without a Center. Second book is called Beyond Awakening. Third book is called The Revelation of Oneness. And they're all available to buy from Amazon.
Amazon.
And they're published by Non-Duality Press.
Non-Duality Press.
In the UK, yeah.
And what's your website?
Lifewithoutacentre.com.
Lifewithoutacentre.com.
And centre is spelled CENTRE.
Okay.
The proper way.
The proper
way.
Original
English,
way.
the original way.
Okay. And so we're really grateful for Jeff Foster being with us.
Thank you.
And Richard Miller here and Never Not Here. We're in Chicago today, and we had a great weekend with Jeff. And I think we're going to be getting a website pretty soon. And so nevernothere.com will probably be available. It's not right now, but I'm hoping it will be by the time you see this. And So come around and see us. We got 3 broadcast areas in Chicago. All these shows are actually available for people that want to approach their own public access. And so if you're seeing this outside of Chicago area, you could have some shows and maybe get them playing in your town. And so I think I'll just say that's all for now. Richard Miller signing off, and thanks for being here.
Beloved calls you here today to ask you for this dance. What will you say? Are you gonna throw the chance away?